evening and welcome to Judaism and Christianity, fourth part. I'm going to look at the Jews in the nations. Different nations, different treatment, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But anyway, we're going to try to just give you a review of what's really happened in the different nations in our time. Not before Christianity, we saw how they offended the Jews in many things, in many ways, but we're now looking at the nations in the modern time. So we see that there is a change in the world. There's a renaissance in France, and there's a reform from 1453 to 1530. Rebirth of faith in the power and human capacity. Man can do it. Faith in the value of the man, being worth as a total person, and not only for his soul. Man is not simply an object of dogmatism, but he becomes a subject with new human values. The rebirth of faith in the objective judgment of mankind as a collective unit. Light a flame of faith in reason and science, common to all men, which contrasted with the artificial barriers of dogmatism. Dogma, not so important at this time. During this period is a renewed passion for beauty and for art. So the spirit of the Italian Renaissance excited with new forces also the streets, almost isolated of the ghetto. In the likeness of his fellow Spaniards, Italians were thinkers who adopted the ideas of Maimonides. For example, Jacob Natalie, Dr. Hillel Verona, and also poets of a lot of talent, such as the famous Emmanuel Romano. So now they're writing religious hymns, poems, songs to love, joy, and scoffed at the foolishness and ignorance. So, good social situation of Italian Jews enabled them to a multifaceted intellectual work. They no longer considered that the religious isolationism was the supreme virtue, the testimony of many famous and fruitful friendships between Jews and Christians during this time. But still, the ghettos are the ghettos, even in the Renaissance. In 1516, we see the Venetian Republic order the segregation of the Jews in a neighborhood that was called ghettos, as in the early days. Various groups were forming ghettos in Europe, and parallel to this, the Jews grew stronger commercially without forgetting the follow-up to their law. See, that's one thing that happens to humankind. The more you oppress them, the more they fight. Christian Kabbalah arose in the Renaissance among Christian scholars as a conciliation between Christianic magic and certain aspects of of Judaism, as a result of the studies and translations of Greek and Hebrew writings. Venetian Ghetto 1516, you can see where they lived and how they lived inside walls. So that was the only place that was given to the Jews in 1516 to live. Here we have the entrance to one of the to one of the ghettos. We got three names here, 1, 2, 3, and which it says Parroquia of San Anis, Campo de Ghetto Novo, or the New Ghetto, and Ponte de Ghetto Vecchio. And this is the entrance to the famous ghettos. Let's go to England and see what was happening in there, 1656. The readmission to England took place during the reign of Oliver Cromwell. At this time, the millenarian expectations and the revival of the Christian interest in the Old Testament, led by the Puritans, honed a new attitude of tolerance and allowed them to settle in the British Isles with the purpose of fulfilling the condition of total dispersion required for universal redemption. You understand that? In other words, they put him in the Isles so that way even the Isles have Jews because they have to go all over the world. According to the scriptures, that's what they're trying to say. So, if they dispersed all over the world, then we can have our universal redemption. Oh boy. Oliver was a man who lived an era of history which saw the struggle for parliamentary government hammered out on British soil, which of course led the process to refinement that eventually matured into the United States government, which sadly very few Americans realize and understand. The French Revolution. Here we go to France. Hope, liberty, equality, fraternity, 1789 to 1799, caused the imbalance of all regimes. In the afternoon, at the close of the French Revolution, there were 400,000 Jews in Eastern Europe. Of these, 300,000 lived in Germany. Question, would they also be released and as a result treated as equals and brothers by the men who had kept them in ghettos and restricted them of all movement? Are they going to do that? Napoleon and the Jews, the assembly of nobles in Paris, the questions. This is what Napoleon asked. Listen to the questions. It's even embarrassing. Were they considered French Jews? Could they do manual work or only engage in usury? Is it not possible to promote marriage between them and the Christians? What kind of a questions is this? But how can you explain, he said, that due to the historical situation, they had to be lenders? Can you explain the difference between a correct assimilation and the self-destruction that follows a mixed marriage? What kind of a self-destruction follows a mixed marriage? So the question was totally absurd. What do you do with that? So we see then, in reality, Napoleon was nothing. He was not enemy in the sense of persecution, but like other intolerant people, was impatient with the Jewish resistance. He saw no reason for its existence, and in their ignorance, he felt that Judaism was harmful. He then took the task of trying to cure them of their errors, even if you had to do it by force, making believe that the great Sanhedrin had given him authority, published a number of edicts known as the infamous decrees, and with them removed from individuals and their territories many of the benefits they had received with great joy as fruits of the revolution. So, an incredible thing. He did. He put together a Sanhedrin. What's a Sanhedrin? Court of law, Jewish court of law, organized with 71 members. And he said, this is not the way to solve the Jewish question. I will never accept any proposal that would force the Jewish people to leave France. Because for me, the Jews are equal to any other citizen of our country. It is a sign of weakness to pull them out of the country, but of strength to assimilate them. Oh, here he goes again. Assimilation process. We're not going to throw them out, but we're going to assimilate it. That was the idea that Mr. Napoleon had. He was not happy. He wanted a Jewish loyalty oath and the admission of subordination, even more dramatic and unifying. With this in mind, he tried to revive the Sanhedrin. That's all. That's what really he wanted to do. Subordination. Let them subordinate to me. So they went back to what they had before. Liberty through religious reforms. Israel Jacobson reformed Judaism. Now we're in 1768 to 1828. This guy was a real bright star. These times of the beginning of the 19th century, Israel Jacobson, one of the most prominent Jews in the province of Westphalia, Germany, and leader in a congregation, introduced a number of changes to the ritual of the synagogue. A few of the Hebrew prayers were translated and sung in German. A mixed choir and instrumental music accompanied the services. A sermon in German had to be part of the ritual. These reforms were small, but represented a separation of the tradition of many centuries, all with the hope of changing the terminology of bizarre. Who are they? They're bizarre. Jacobson saw Napoleon as the emancipator of the Jews. On the occasion of the Assembly of Jewish Notables in Paris on May 30, 1806, he wrote an enthusiastic letter to Napoleon. But unfortunately, none of that really went. These reforms were slight, but at least it was a change of terminology in the minds also of Napoleon Bonaparte and the rest of France. If we go to Russia, we go December 23, 1777, this Tsar Alexander protested violently against the liberation of the Jews and encouraged the Orthodox Church in Moscow to protest aggressively. Catholic Austria and Protestant England also protested. Why? Because it was the time for emancipation, but not the Jews. In Prussia, the Lutheran Church was extremely hostile to the decision of Napoleon, and the reaction in Italy was not favorable, but not as aggressive. By the way, in today's world, the Jews are grateful really to Napoleon, even though that he wanted to have them subjugate to them, but it gave him some good things overall. So the limit of the colony in Russia, we can see it right here. It was a lot bigger than any other place. The main reasons for its creation were economic and nationalist, while the traditional Russian society was divided into nobles, serfs, and clergy. Industrial progress makes the emergence of the middle class, which will be rapidly packed by the Jews, who did not belong to any of these classes. By limiting the area of residence, the imperial power tries to ensure the growth of a non-Jewish middle class. Well, it's no matter where you turn. Let's go to the next one. The shtetls. The concentration of Jews in this area of residence in Russia toward these objectives was easier for pogroms. This, along with the repressive and discriminatory laws of May, in many cases devastated entire communities. Although pogroms occurred throughout the existence of the area of residence, the most severe events happened in 1881, 1883, 1903, and 1906, aiming to hundreds of communities, killing thousands of Jews and causing hundreds of thousands of rubles in property damage. Life in the shtetls, which is called small towns for Jews in the area of residence, was very hard and hit by poverty. A sophisticated system of voluntary welfare organizations were developed to meet the needs of the population, following the Jewish tradition of what is called tzedakah. Various organizations provided clothing to poor students, provided kosher food to Jewish soldiers conscripted into the Tsar's army, granted taliyot and trousseau the poor brides-to-be, and gave technical education to orphans. Now, if you look at, there is a movie that if you watch, you're going to see exactly the life of the Jews in Russia. It's called Fiddler on the Roof. It's an American musical directed by Norman Jewison in the year 1971. It is based on a novel by Russian writing Sholom Aleichem, titled Tevi's Daughters. In this film version, the sound of the violin that touches the violinist, used as a metaphor for the unstable life of Jewish communities in the Tsarist Russia, was dubbed by Isaac Stern. The film won 3 Academy Awards. It is a little long, but it is worthwhile looking. And it shows you a lot, and it teaches you a lot. You're going to see the life of the Jews in Russia. A problem. This problem of the Jews in Russia, as the government saw it, was not how to improve economic condition in these impoverished peoples, but as how more effectively could they destroy the Jewish life. Both Poles and Russians agreed to treat Jews as a hostile population. The Poles wanted them to become Poles, but fight in the Polish army for freedom was not enough. The vast majority of Jews were depressed by the action of the government and shocked by the words and actions of the assimilated ones, but they did not surrender to their threats. The Tsars. The problem with Russia was different from Eastern European countries. There, the Jews were much more numerous than any other country, constituting 2/3 of the Jewish world population. For the Tsar, Nicholas I, one of the most cruel tyrants that have existed, this did not mean nothing more to give orders, some sensitive, others ridiculous, but most cruel, trying to change the people gradually. They try to modernize them on their clothes and ornaments. The use of their coats and long beards, that was common among them. He ordered them to wear European-style clothes and cut their beards. So they were trying to Russify the Jews. Well, that really never happened. They were not citizens. They're suffering from a legislation that restricted the rights of residents, economic opportunities, marriage, and many others. Having been given little incentive to assimilate, they continue to live separated from the general population. Despite the fact that a small number of financiers and speculators helped the construction of the railway and other adventures, only they were allowed to settle in the towns outside the colony. Nicholas II of Russia. In 1894, Nicholas II succeeded his father, Alexander III, as the Tsar. A weak sovereign, Nicholas was persuaded by those who regarded the Jews as subject enemies. The main instrument used in the propagation of this notion were the protocols of the elders of Zion, which you already have heard me talk about. A forgery prepared for the enlightenment of the Tsar. There the Jews were much more numerous than any other country. For the next 20 years were called to county by the dissemination of liberal ideas in Russia. And this was a false representation, since the liberal ideas and activities and revolutionary forces were fermented in the intellectual atmosphere of the universe, which were only a tiny percentage of Jews. Treason in Vienna. Russia, Austria, and Prussia, Holy Alliance. They used every wicked ways to uproot the slightest suspicion of liberalism. In numerous pamphlets and declarations by these reactionary governments, it was right that the Christian society could not give equal or political opportunity to Jews. Many of the small states of Germany tore down the promises given to them. In some places where they had recently been received, they were expelled again. Hep, hep, hep. Gerusalemme è perdita. Jerusalem has fallen. Baviera, Germany, October 1819. Revolutionary pogroms against the Ashkenazi Jews. Anti-Jewish riots led by the movement Hep Hep, the initials which probably mean Gerusalemme è perdita, Jerusalem has fallen, wounded deeply the Jewish pride. Those who were born outside of the ghetto now again were considered foreigners, ancient Asian people. The abyss between Jews and Germans seemed insurmountable. A new nationalism, result of the French Revolution. The peoples of Europe became conscious of their national state. No longer were fighting in the wars of the kings and did not feel as subject of the kings. On the other hand, now pursuing national policies, adopted national ambitions, and in the case of Germany and Italy, sought national unity. From this time onwards, the nationalistic spirit also became an important factor in Jewish life. Unquestionably, they adopted the national idea of the nation where they were born and became zealous defenders of nationalism in Germany, France, England, Italy, and in other countries, far more than the Christian of these states. We're going to finish here today now, and the next one we are going to see. Creo que puedo terminarlo bien. ¿Ya?
Tiene 23 minutos.
¿Cuánto?
Lleva 23 minutos recién.
¿So me faltan cuánto?
22 minutos.
Oh, I got time. Eso lo puedes cortar, ¿no? Okay.
No te preocupes.
Okay. But there is a case, and it's called the Dreyfus case. This happened in France, 1894. It's a Jewish captain of the French army. Remember, now they're fighting for the country. They are in all the countries that we saw before. Defenders of nationalism. Where? In Germany, France, England, Italy, and other countries. Even more, like we said, like the Christian of these states. But now we have this situation, 1894. This man, Alfred Dreyfus, was blamed for treason and sentenced to prison for life on Devil's Island. Alfred was accused of having passed secret information to the Germans. The corpus delicti, or the body of crime, was the famous bordereau, a letter without a signature found in a trash can by a cleaning woman in the German embassy. Incredible. This man was a Jewish captain of the French army. A man with a name, a man well-liked, an honorable man. Through the process of elimination, looking at the letter, led to the arrest of Dreyfus. An artery, no, vas a tener que quitar eso. Artillery, yo no sé cómo me quito, porque no sé cómo se dice eso. Artillería.
Artillery.
Artillery. Déjame tratarlo. Artillery.
Okay.
No, ¿dónde estoy? Okay. Dreyfus was rich, ambitious, highly assimilated, and a Jew. He was arrested and held incommunicado, tried before military courts, military court martial, and formally charged with treason. During the trial, the fragile evidence of the charter was supported by a secret file only subject to the judges. So he didn't have a chance. These guys looked at the letter and decided that it was him who wrote that letter. So they took him where? Devil's Island. So you can see him here now, older, 1935, year of his death. To the right, Alfred Dreyfus, rehabilitated. In the center, Captain Tards, researcher and discoverer of numerous frauds. Here you can see the island. This is where he was. He could not even see the sea because they decided he was evil enough to put a fence before him so he could not see over the fence. He was there for 5 years. But there was a man by the name of Emilio Zola. He was a newspaperman. And he wrote what is called Je accuse, I accuse. The revelation of the scandal in I Accuse, an article by Emile Zola in 1898, led to an unleashed succession of political and social crises in France, which at the time we speak in 1899 revealed the prominent fractures underlying the French Third Republic. Deep and lasting divisions into two opposing camps, the Dreyfusards, supporters of Dreyfus, and the anti-Dreyfusards, or opponents of Dreyfus. This brought in a lot of problems, but in the streets of France, you could hear the words, "Death to the Jews! Death to the Jews!" Meanwhile, this man is sent to France to write. He was a newspaperman also, and he was supposed to write about what's happening in France. He said, "The case of Dreyfus involves more than a judicial error. Involves the desire of the vast majority of the French to condemn a Jew and condemn all the Jews. The French people, or at least the vast majority of the French people, does not want to extend the rights of men to the Jews. The edict of the Great Revolution has been revoked." One of the correspondents who witnessed the ceremony in which Dreyfus was stripped of his rank was Theodore Herzl, who then worked as a reporter for the Vienna newspaper Nouvelle Presse. Theodore was born on Wednesday, April 2 of 1860 in the city of Budapest, Hungary. At the age of 12, time for his bar mitzvah, Herzl had the following dream. The King Messiah came, an old man, glorious and majestic, He took me in his arms and lifted me up in the wings of the wind. In one of the iridescent clouds, we find the figure of Moses. His face was familiar to me as the face of the statue of Michelangelo. The Messiah told Moses, "It is for this child that I prayed." But to me, he told me, "Go and declare to the Jews that I am coming soon, and I will do great wonders and great things for my people and for the whole world." This dream always stayed with him. Herzl had realized the problem of anti-Semitism, especially the French, and during the trial of Dreyfus, was always convinced of his innocence. He said about this man, he said, "A Jew who, as an officer in the general staff, has before it an honorable career, cannot commit such a crime. The Jews who for so long have been condemned to a civil state of dishonor, as a result, have developed a hunger, almost pathologically, honor. And a Jewish officer in this aspect, especially Jewish. He knew that Dreyfus was innocent. So, the situation, he said, will not change to improve, but to make matters worse. There's only one way out, the promised land. The promised land where we can have crooked noses, red or black beards, and we can have crooked legs without anyone hating us for it. Where we can live as free men in our own land, where we can die in peace in our own homeland. The Jewish state is a global necessity. I think that for me, life has been completed and the history of the world has begun. On 29th of August, the first Zionist Congress was prepared in Basel, Switzerland. Most of the delegates were from all parts of the world and saw Herzl for the first time in their lives. The total number of delegates at the first session was in the thousands. Herzl opened with the first session with the following words: "We're gathered here to put the cornerstone of the house to shelter the Jewish nation." So, there was one more person, Pastor William Heckler, Theodor Herzl's first disciple. In the pages of the journal of Theodor Herzl, there is mention of the work and of the incredible devotion of the Reverend William Heckler to the cause of Zionism. Heckler understood that Herzl was literally a prophetic figure. In the newspapers, we find mention the conclusion that Heckler made in the year 1897 after the founding of the Zionist organization. Everything that was going on had been prophesied to ancient Israel. It was in these terms that the Reverend Heckler spoke to the great Duke of Baden and many other high officials concerning the Jews in the nation. In his memoirs, Heckler writes, "It was God's desire that I could help my good friend, Dr. Theodor Herzl. This was manifested in my being in Vienna in the year 1895 until 1910 in a position that allowed me to bring to the attention of certain persons to the importance of the messianic vision of the Jewish leader. The memory of our work for the ancient people of God, Israel, is precious and sacred to me. So sacred that I can't think much about it. I was with him in the beginning of his vision, and until the last moment of his earthly life. Unfortunately, because of his illness, he had a heart problem. When he said this, he sent a message to his people and says, "Give greetings to all and tell them that I gave my heart and blood for my people." Those were the last words of Theodore Herzl. Wilhelm II, German Emperor, and now we're going to get 1859 to 1941, anti-Semitism. Wilhelm's biographer, Lamar Cecil, identified Wilhelm's curious but well-developed anti-Semitism, noting that in 1888, a friend of Wilhelm declared that the young Kaiser's dislike of his Hebrew subjects, one rooted in a perception that they possess an overweening influence in Germany, was so strong that it could not be overcome. Cecil concludes, Wilhelm never changed, and throughout his life, he believed that Jews were perversely responsible, largely through their prominence in the Berlin press and in leftist political movements for encouraging opposition to his rule. On December 2, and we finish with this one, 1919, Wilhelm wrote to Field Marshal August von Mackensen, denouncing his own abdication as the deepest, most disgusting shame ever perpetrated by a person in history. The Germans have done to themselves, egged on and misled by the tribe of Judah. Let no German ever forget this, nor rest until these parasites have been destroyed and exterminated from German soil. Wilhelm advocated a regular international all-world pogrom à la Russe as the best cure, and further believed that Jews were a nuisance that humanity must get rid of some way or other. I believe the best thing would be gas. So, next time we will see the next class, and I hope that you understand what's really happening here in the nation. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.